In this video, we will address scoring prior record factors on Virginia sentencing guidelines. We'll provide some general definitions, review key rules, and give you an example of scoring a prior record factor. When you're scoring prior record factors on Virginia sentencing guidelines, you have to use the defendant's complete criminal record. Criminal record includes any conviction prior to the date of sentencing. As long as you have a conviction, it must be scored on guidelines. Offense dates are not relevant. Arrest dates are not relevant. All that is needed is a conviction, and that a conviction prior to the date of sentencing is prior record. When we say you must use the defendant's complete criminal record includes the juvenile record, the adult record, criminal traffic offenses and adjudications, probation violations, suspended sentence violations, local ordinance convictions. What is not included are civil offenses, juvenile status offenses, or traffic infractions. In other words, if there is a Virginia crime code in the VCC book, then it must be scored on guidelines. And when we say you use the defendant's complete criminal history, there is no limit on how far you can go back to score a prior conviction. We score both adult and juvenile record. There are 6 key rules when you go to score prior record factors on the guidelines. The first one deals with how do you deal with out-of-state offenses. You compare the out-of-state conviction to Virginia's current statute. You have to ask yourself, does that conviction violate a Virginia law? If so, you determine what the penalty for a similar offense would be here in Virginia. So out-of-state offenses are based and scored on Virginia's current penalty structure. Some examples: possessing a handgun without a license. In many states, it's a felony. In Virginia, there is not a requirement at this time to possess a handgun without a license, and therefore would not be scored on guidelines. Also, when you talk about prior record, if you think about larceny offenses, part of the penalty structure in Virginia is based on the value of property that is stolen. If the value is less than $1,000, no matter if it's a felony in the other state, it must be scored as a misdemeanor here. We use penalty structure as a measurement of behavior. So we want those folks who committed the same type of offense to pick up the same amount of points no matter when or where they committed the offense. The same is true when you look back at Virginia convictions. It used to be a felony if the value of the property was $200 or more recently $500 or more. You still must determine, based on the current penalty structure, was the value of the property $1,000 or more. If it's unknown, then you must score it as a misdemeanor. Possession of marijuana is a civil offense in Virginia. You may have some out-of-state offenses that have possession of marijuana with a significant quantity. But as long as it's possession and not a distribution, then it is not scored on the sentencing guidelines. When you go to score out a prior record factor, and it's based on the penalty structure, we score 12 months the same as 1 year. It does make a difference for Department of Corrections because 12 months equals a jail sentence, 1 year equals prison, but for guidelines, 12 months and 1 year are scored exactly the same. If you have an offense with a statutory maximum of life and you need to score it, you're going to score it based on the highest penalty available for that factor. The example on the screen, we have first-degree murder, has a life maximum. The highest number of points that's available for prior convictions and adjudications is 11 points. So 11 points would be assigned based on that life maximum. When you score on probation violations are scored based on the statutory maximum for the most serious underlying offense. So the example that's on the screen, when you connect it to the most serious underlying offense, it is for a possession with intent to distribute cocaine. That has a 40-year max. So when you're scoring the probation violation, you scored as a 40-year maximum, not the amount of revocable time that the defendant had, but what was the penalty structure for the most serious offense for which they were on probation. If you're unsure of the penalty structure, you can always refer to your Virginia Crime Code book. That will list the current penalty structures here in Virginia. It's important to remember that when you're scoring prior record, that attempts and conspiracies have different penalty structures than completed acts. There's one exception that deals with conspiracy to distribute drugs. Now, we provide a table, page 5 of the VCC book, or Appendix C in the back of your guidelines manual, and it's also available on the mobile manual. If you look at that table and you have a completed act that has a maximum penalty of 20 years to 40 years, for the attempt, it will change to 10 years. And below the attempted column, we have the penalty structure for conspiracies. So you can refer to this table so that you score the prior conviction correctly. Now, I said there was one exception. That one exception deals with the distribution of drugs. You'll see that for attempts, there is a change in the penalty structure for several offenses. So if you have an offense with a statutory maximum of 40 years and it's an attempt, it drops down to 10 years. But if you look at conspiracy, there is no change. The penalty is the same for a completed act versus a conspired act. The most important rule when you're scoring prior record factors on the guidelines is that when you're unclear, you always err on behalf of the defendant. If you're not sure it's a felony, then you must score it as a misdemeanor. If you know it's a felony, but you're not sure at what level, in Virginia it may have multiple levels of felonies, you score it at the lowest felony. Again, if you're not sure it's a felony, you score it as a misdemeanor. If you're not sure that it violates Virginia law, then it's not to be scored at all. So these are the 6 rules that you'll need to score Virginia sentencing guidelines. When you go to score the factor, and we're going to use, in this example, the larceny worksheet. So there's several factors dealing with prior convictions. For most of the factors, you're going to score every single count. When you see the word convictions, it indicates that we're scoring the adult record. When you see the word adjudications, we're scoring the juvenile record. And in most cases, we're going to be scoring both. Sometimes a factor may exclude traffic offenses. Sometimes it may only include adult record. That's why I would advise, if you're new to guidelines, to open up your guidelines manual. Right across from the worksheet is a summary instruction page. If you don't have a guidelines manual, it is available on the mobile manual. So these factors, you're scoring every single count. There is one factor where you're limited, and you will not score the defendant's complete criminal history. And that factor is prior convictions and adjudications. If you think of this factor as a snapshot of the defendant's most recent criminal history, because all we're scoring are 5 events. The maximum that we can score here would be 5 events. We are going to score felonies first, so we look at the criminal history, try to identify all the felony sentencing events. We only take the most serious offense from the event. The example on the screen, we have a possession with intent, which has a 40-year max, an elude, that's a 5-year maximum, and a grand larceny auto, which is a 20-year max. The most serious is the one with the highest statutory maximum, which would be possession with intent. And that would be the only offense that we would score from that event. We continue to look for felonies, and we go all the way back to the juvenile record, and we find a grand larceny auto there. No more felonies as juveniles, so we start all over looking for misdemeanors, the most recent misdemeanor. And we scored a maximum of 5 events. So we pick up the petty larceny from 2008 for a total of 5. Now, it's important to remember that we do not score possession of marijuana because it is now a civil offense here in Virginia. So these are the 5 events that we would score on the sentencing guidelines. So when we go to score this factor on worksheet A, we're going to add the maximum penalties together. The probation violation, based on the possession with intent, would pick up 40 years. The possession with intent picks up 40 years. The grand larceny auto picks up 20 years. The petty larceny, which was reduced from the felony, picks up 1 year. And second petty larceny picks up 1 year. You add those together, you get a total of 102 that falls in the range of 37 or more, and you enter the score of 4. So that's the way that you score this factor on worksheet A. Now there is a different scoring mechanism for worksheet C. When you go to worksheet C, you're assigning points to each. The probation violation of 40-year max picks up 3 points. Possession with intent picks up 3 points. The grand larceny auto picks up 1 point. And the 2 petty larcenies pick up 0 points for a total of 7. And 7 is what you would enter in the box. If you want more information on the difference between scoring worksheets A and B versus C, watch video number 3. So we've given you general definitions, gone over 6 key rules, and given you 2 examples of scoring prior record on the sentencing guidelines. We now have an exercise for you, and you can find this exercise on the exercise handout that you can download from our website. What I'd like you to do is look at this criminal history, go through, identify your 5 most recent and serious, and score the partial worksheet that's printed below. If you have any questions on this factor or any factors, you can give us a call, send us a text, or send us an email. Thank you.